Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Today's Monday Masterclass is all about turning the corner from discovery interviews to preference interviews. And, we're going to go over some Blue Help articles. But what's interesting is this is the one point in the blueprinting process which historically has been the one where teams needed the most help. Scott, you and I were just talking about it. This is a one time, if you want an AIM coach to help, you raise your hand and go, help, I need help. And I thought about this. I thought, well, is it because we've done a bad job of designing, discovery to preference? And here's what I'd like to believe. I'd like to believe, no, this is just a difficult thing. I mean, if you talk to a lot of people who have been doing VOC over the years, that you'll hear them say things like, well, we heard a lot of really good stuff, but when it came time to analyze and process this and really get down to some meaningful, actionable items, we really struggled. So I think intrinsically, it's hard to go from the diverging process where you got lots of stuff from customers and then go into that conversion process. But we think we've made it just about as simple as we can. So we're going to take you through this. As you said at the onset, Scott, now that we have it in the cloud, I think we've made it about as simple as it can be made. So let's take everybody through it. Any thoughts you want to add before in fact, I'll start navigating over there. Anything you want to add to that, Scott?
Yeah, while we're doing this, it's interesting. It's something that every voice of customer practitioner has often had to kind of create their own method for. I've seen folks just very comfortable in Word documents, moving things around. I've seen folks use Excel and all the filters. My personal process was I used to write each individual outcome on a 3x5 card. I would spread them all out on the floor and get some colleagues, and we would move them around. And you might even see some remnants of that within what we ended up doing in the cloud.
Yep. But with the new process, we're really taking a dent into the office supply market on those 3x5 cards, aren't we? So we'll be, we'll be doing it digitally so you can do it with your teammates around the world. So let's get started. We like to start whenever we can with some Blue Help articles so you know where to go back and find this. So you go to your Blueprinting Center, blueprintingcenter.com, you click on Blue Help, and we're talking about turning the corner from discovery to preference. So it won't surprise you that we really want to go right into this preference section right here. I mean, you could always use the search box, but let's just go right to preference interviews. And when you do, you'll see, of course, over on the left, all the things under preference interview. And there we go, right at the very top, how to prepare for preference interviews. So let me walk through these 4 steps relatively quickly. Then we'll go to the software and show you how to do it. That'll probably take us a full 30 minutes or so. Then if you have questions on this, stop us as we're going through. Just unmute yourself and ask a question or leave a chat message. And then after we're done with this subject, this topic, if you have questions on anything else, we'll go ahead and try to address those. So let's go into this. The first thing you want to do, you say, you know what, we are done with our discovery interviews. We're mostly hearing echoes. We don't need to do any more. So you click on review your discovery interviews, and then pretty simple process here. What you're going to want to do, let's begin with the end in mind. You're going to want to come up with 10 outcomes that you can take in preference interviews. And you'll ask these questions, how important and how satisfied, and a few other. That's what you want to come up with, 10 outcomes on this. Scott and I are talking about how we can eventually make this more than 10, but for now, that tends to work pretty good. You're going to make this decision internally as a team, but to make sure we don't get supplier-centric, we have some safeguards. You're only going to start with whatever the TPs that customers volunteered for. So if there's an outcome that you thought of and the customers didn't give it to you as a top pick, it won't be there. You'll look at how much customer enthusiasm, and you'll make this decision as a team. And then you'll have a safety net in the preference interviews in case you miss something. So the first thing you'll do is you'll look at your discovery sticky notes, make sure you got your TPs and your MHs marked. Now, here's something we often see teams struggle with. They often mark too many things must have than they should be TPs. So let me just take a pause on this paragraph and try to explain this because it's a little tricky. Technically speaking, a must have is necessary and sufficient. So if the customer said, hey, listen, we need to have 50,000 fluxes before the plastic part breaks. then you need to ask them this magic question. You need to ask them, if we gave you more than 50,000, would it help? If they go, nope, just need 50,000, we're out of here, then it's a must-have because it's necessary, 50,000, but it was also sufficient. If they said, oh, we'd love to have 60,000 or 70,000, it's really not a true must-have. It's a top pick with a minimum requirement. So now you have two choices. Mark it as a top pick, or if you want to make sure you don't lose track of that 50,000, you can always call it a must-have at 50,000, but also put in maximize the number of flexes as a top pick. The reason you don't have to keep it as a must-have is because later in preference interviews, we'll ask them what's fairly acceptable, and they're going to say 50,000. Okay, so that's the deal on that. Don't overdo the must-haves. I'll show you how you can get some good ideas on how to construct good outcome statements in a little bit later, minimize likelihood of damage and so forth. But make sure you got some nice, clean outcome statements in here. So that is step number one, is cleaning up and checking out your discovery interviews. Then you're going to go after the must-haves. Now, you're really going to do two steps in the must-haves. You're going to go to tool 3.1, and I'll demonstrate this in a moment, okay? And what you're going to do is start moving these sticky notes, these must-have sticky notes into the staging area, looking for duplicates. When you see a duplicate, you can put it on the bottom or the top of the stack, okay? And whatever's on the top is what will be read. If you say, oops, that should have been a top pick, drag it over into the TP area right here, okay? And then once you're done with that, what you're going to do is clean these up. There's a few things I'll show you how you can expand things and get more viewability. You can add more must-haves if you think about them. A lot of flexibility there. And then the second step is you're going to prepare the text for the interview. So if you have a lot of other gobbledygook on the sticky note, just remove it, make it nice and clean so that your customers will see it during the preference interview. You're going to display these must-haves. Hey, Dan, if I cut it out here, will it mess up my original sticky note? Nope, not at all. It only affects going forward, not going backwards, okay? And that is it for the preparing the MHs. Now, preparing the top picks, this is the part that's a little bit tricky. There's 4 steps to this. It starts out very similar to what you saw for the must-haves, and that is your TPs from all of your interviews will be over in this staging area. Could be 20, could be 80, could be over 100. You start dragging them over here looking for duplicates. Well, gosh, Dan, if I have 50, I'm going to have a really hard time finding these duplicates. You're right. So this was actually Scott's idea. We came up with these little category boards, little affinitization groupings. So if it's easier for you to group box packaging by durability and handling and appearance, go ahead and create these separate little boards, throw things in there, and then go after the sort of duplication that we talked about earlier. Okay, the next thing, you're going to have your teammates vote for their 7 favorites, the 7 top picks that they think should be in the final list of 10, and you'll record their votes with these thumbs up or thumbs down. That's the second step. And then what you'll do is you'll go through, now you've got a list with the high vote getters on top, and you'll go through and say, it's definitely in green, it's definitely out red, or gray means we're not sure yet. And you'll keep track over here. And then the last step is to do a little cleanup of the outcome statement and come up with an outcome name. And that's how you prepare for this. So that's the last of the preparation. I think what I might do, Scott, is come back to the strategies if we have time. There's some different questions we get, but let's talk about the mechanics first. And let me take a breath. Any questions we've had so far, Scott, as we've been diving into this?
No questions so far. While we're
we
thinking
will
about
keep
the
forging.
Blue Help Center, also there's also some articles that actually honestly are pretty similar in the software section where we have some videos walking through that process as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. So you go here into the software and you can see some things there as well. Good point. Good point. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the software and do a quick demo. So let me, I've already opened this up. Now I'm going to go into the demo Acme packaging right here, okay? And I'm going to expand this a little bit. Now, the nice thing about the demo is it's all completed all the way to a market case, and I can play around with it and it'll return to its original state. I can't mess it up. That's a nice thing. The bad thing about it is if I want to demonstrate something in the middle of the process like we're going to do now, well, there's no sticky notes that have not been processed. So I have to fool the software a little bit, and I have to go in here, and I'm going to grab this interview here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make up some must-haves. We'll make this and this a must-have, and we'll make this a top pick here, top pick, top pick, top pick. Now, this is what you would do at the end of your interview with the customer in the room. Then you would click on top picks. And then what you would do is while the customer is with you, you're going to replace this top part, which is identical to here, with a true outcome statement. So it might be something like maximize water resistance boxes, something like that, okay? So you're going to, and of course, you're going to ask the customer, is this what you want, and so forth. I won't do it with the rest of these, but that's what you're supposed to do at the end of discovery interview. Now, we only have 2 must-haves and 4 top picks, but you can kind of imagine how this goes. Normally, you'd have a lot more, especially top picks. Okay, let's go to 3.1. Now, I have to unlock this because we have a finished project. What you don't want to do is on your real project, go out and do 3 preference interviews and then go back and willy-nilly start changing what those top picks were, because you'll have 1 to 10 ratings on something that isn't valid anymore. So the software gets really nervous. Right now, we only have to have them say, no, I'm sure twice. Maybe we'll make it 3 or 4 times, Scott. But that's why I had to click that twice, because we're so nervous that somebody will start changing things. Anyway, this is a demo, so I can change it. Remember, we had 2 must-haves, and obviously we had done this before. So I'm going to drag these in here, and what I'm going to do is look for any duplicates. Ah, there's a duplicate, glue joints. Do I want to put this on the top or the bottom? Oh, let's put this on the bottom. Fire standards. Oh, there's one. Let's go ahead and put this one on the top of the stack. You can always come back here, click it, and look at the stacks. You can promote things to the top. You can put them in the trash. You can put them back in the staging area and so forth. So there's a lot you can do with this. But I'm happy with that. So that was step 1, eliminate duplicates. Now I'm going to prepare the text for presentation to the customer. This one has a lot of extra stuff that was in the sticky note. I'll get rid of that. That looks pretty good. If I see some more duplicates, I can delete, I can clean up, but I'm just going to say done. Now, if you don't say done here, it's going to holler at you later. It's hollered at me many times, so don't feel special. But that's it for must-haves. Pretty simple, right? Now, top picks is like that, but it is a little more advanced. There's a few more steps. Let me unlock this. Yes, yes again. Now, remember, we only had 4 here. If you have 20 or 30 or 40, this is not going to be enough space. Okay, sure, you could not only hit this maximizer up here, you could hit this maximizer. That's nice. You could make the notes you're dragging over even smaller. That's nice. But still, if you've got 20, 30, 40, you're probably going to have too many here. Okay? So what do? Well, we have these category boards. And you can click the plus and create a new category board whenever you want. You can also revise these. I could call this box durability. You get to name these, okay? These are yours. So think of some, you don't want to have like 40 sticky notes and then 35 category boards. That'd be silly. But I like to do it so, you know, if I have, 5, 10, maybe even 15 sticky notes in each category, it's something I can process pretty well, okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put water resistance and box durability, same with damage from tearing. Recycle, I'll put that in the other. Reduce time to track, I'll call that a handling issue. So now I've gotten rid of my staging area top picks. I don't have any here. I could leave some if I wanted. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to process them. So back to box durability. Water resistance, I'm going to put that in damage from moisture, and then damage from tearing. I think I have, there's one, I'll put it on the bottom. Okay? So the numbers at the top, 7, 4, 6, 3, that indicates how thick the stack is. This has got a stack of 7 of these, okay? So now I've finished the elimination here. I can always add more if we have any. Let me take a little breath once again, Scott. Everybody doing okay so far?
I believe so. No question. But so,
okay,
yes, if anybody has any questions, certainly stop us along the way. You can, we've got a relatively small group. You can unmute yourself, quite frankly, or if you're more comfortable, you can just put the question in chat.
Either one, yeah. For the people listening to the recording home, we have less than 500 people on the line, right, Scott?
Yeah, we do.
Just kidding. So now that's step 1. Now we're going to collect the votes here. Okay, so that's step 2. Now notice we kept those little numbers up above. Now these would all be, no votes in here. This is where you're manually going to have people write down their 7 that they want to see in the preference interviews. Then you're going to say, okay, folks, raise your hand if you voted for number 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so 6 of you voted for number 1. Raise your hand if you voted for number 2. Okay, so we have 5 votes there. Later, we'll probably have a phone app where people can do their voting, but for now, this works okay. That's a pretty simple one. We collected the votes here, okay? Now we're going to click again, and step 3, we're going to select our top 10. Now, these will all be gray when you get started, okay? And you're going to go through as a team and say, what do you guys think? Is this one definitely in? Oh, yeah. How about this one? Definitely out? Yeah, definitely out. How about this one? Oh, still not sure. So you're working your way through these things, trying to come up to 10. And if you notice it has 10, if you go too far, it'll holler at you, okay? So we'll undo that. So you're looking to get 10 of these selected. That's your 3rd step. Then your final step is getting this all cleaned up. So if I needed to get rid of the extra in the sticky note, I would do that. Now, what you have to do is put in a short outcome name, and it can only have 20 characters because we're going to be making some charts. We need labels and axis markings and so forth, okay? So see if I've got all my outcome names, all my outcome statements. Looks pretty good. Now, check this out. You're always going to have instructions up here for every step. I should have been showing you these. It tells you exactly what to do in every step. And then there's also examples of good outcome statements here, okay? But if I would have done this on the first 3.
All right.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Dan. Sorry to interrupt, but just to clarify, I got a good question. So this is something we're doing with the team. This is not something that customers view at this point, just to clarify.
Exactly. This is something between discovery and preference, which are both with customers, but this is an internal team one. I think I would like to have my whole project team. I want to make sure I've got people who are there on the interviews, listening to customers. It's a little bit of a democratic process. Some people are nervous because the customers aren't there, but the fact is you have represented the customers with their top picks and the people who are on the interviews. So we find that it tends to be very good. We have very few cases where the original 10 their team comes up with is proven to be the wrong 10 based upon what the customers tell us when we say, did we miss any? Okay. To make that a little bit clearer, when you say, did we miss any? Yes, your customers will often say, ooh, add number 11. It's very rare that they will tell you the same number 11 in interview number 1, number 2, number 3, where you go, oh man, we really did miss number 11. We really should put this in there. Good question. Now we're going to hit done. And basically, I'm going to get out of here. We are done preparing for preference interviews. So what's it look like? We go to 3.3. Here, it brings over all of the discovery interviews we had. And we can decide if we want, these will all be marked, not targeted when they start off. And you can decide if you want to use these for a preference interview and so forth, or maybe not. So this one's a finished one, so it's kind of goofy here. All right, so that's that. And then you can also check out these settings. Now, these settings were something you set up in Discovery. You could name your regions any way you wanted, remember? You could put in different points of the value position, direct customers, customers. There was an other category here. Package size makes sense for this project, active packaging, but maybe there's something different that makes sense for you. And job functions. Now, here's the thing. You were doing the best you could in Discovery, but you may have heard some things in Discovery that help you sub-segment your market differently. For instance, if you were making a paint ingredient, you may have noticed that paint producers selling to homeowners responded differently than paint producers selling to contractors. So maybe you have another way of dividing this up. Homeowner market, paint contractor market. So keep listening during your discovery. Is there another way that would differentiate the responses I get in preference interviews? Because later, when you're in the preference interviews analyzing the data, if you can slice and dice these, it's very powerful. Okay, so you also have the prep sheet, very similar to the one in Discovery, except there are no trigger maps and there's no current state questions. So it's pretty simple, really. So we'll get out of there. Now we're going to show you what discovery or preference interviews look like. So we click on this, and let's say you're ready to do your Amazon interview. Actually, you've already finished it. This is where you introduce your team, introduce them. This top one here is a good place to start, with the meeting. Then the most important part is outcome ratings. Now these will all start down here, and you'll say, it's good to read these. How important is it to minimize likelihood of damage from moisture? And they'll go, ooh, that's very important. And you click on next. And they'll, again, start down here, and you might say, so, how satisfied are you today with your ability to minimize the likelihood of box damage from moisture? Oh man, that's barely acceptable. Okay. You keep going through it. And then you can tab through these pretty quickly if you want. It's very quick. And that's what you basically do. Now, when you get to the end, you hit done, and you can move these around if they don't like the position relative to each other. But notice this question. Are there any other important outcomes that we didn't rank other than, must-haves? And if they give you one, you can add it here and put in the outcome statement, put in the outcome name and save it, and then you can go ahead and get your 1 to 10 ratings. If, for instance, the first customer says, yeah, you left out UV resistance, and the second customer says you left out UV resistance, and the third customer says you left out UV resistance, that's when you might say, shoot, I think we missed UV resistance. And that's when you might actually go back and change your list of original 10 to drop out something that was not interesting and add in UV resistance. And make sure your earlier interviews, you call back the customer and say, hey, we had a question on UV resistance, on importance and satisfaction. However, as I said earlier, that occurrence where you totally missed a really important one is very rare. The rest of the interview, I won't take you through it all, but you're getting how they measure the outcome, what's fairly acceptable, totally satisfied. This is where you'd put the 50,000 flexes if they wanted more than 50,000. There's the must-haves. Remember, these are the ones that you worded very nicely, and they would say which of these they agree with. And then you can even have them focus on what their top 3 outcomes are, which ones they would pick and why they want them, and so forth. And there's a place for other information here, including how to benchmark. And then when you're all done, you go to a coffee shop, clean up your notes, and then send them a copy of the PDF. You can export this. And customers really like this. It's got a lot of information. I mean, they kind of made some business decisions while you were facilitating it. And so this is a nice way of sending this back to them and saying, here's what we heard. Would you still agree with all this? Okay. All right, I'm going to leave this up here and see if we have any more questions. I thought this might go over 30 minutes, Scott, but I think we covered the basics. While people are thinking if they have any questions on this topic, anything that you can think of we should add, Scott, about the turning the corner from discovery to preference?
Sorry, I'm just looking over. We did have a few questions. I tell you what, everybody, I did my best to answer them in the chat. Is there anybody that would like to chime in on something that I did not answer adequately, or would like some more explanation?
Or go ahead and bring it up. Go ahead and bring up what you had in chat, because maybe it'll be of interest to somebody else too.
Right. Okay. So let's see. So well, there were just questions about the voting process back during the before we go to customers, and so I think we clarified that already. That's something that's internally, not done with the customer. And then, as Dan showed, we do the preference interviews, and then customers are actually rating for importance and satisfaction, and that's what provides the ranking there. There was another question, Dan, about during Tool 3.2, if we could organize those by the descriptors of the region, value chain position, et cetera. And that's, of course, not a functionality we have today, but that was a question.
Right. But that raises a really good question. Can we do it by different points in the value chain? So let's think about that for a minute. If you heard, think about it this way. If you make an ingredient that goes into coating, and your customers make the coating, and then their customers, let's say, paint a car with it or something, okay? If most of the outcomes are about the final finish on the car, we'll call it a product-related outcome. What's the tar resistance, UV resistance, scratch resistance, grease resistance, okay. Then hypothetically, both your direct customer, the coating producer, and the car producer should be interested in that, right? So you would expect you could use the same 10 outcomes. Now, what if this happened? What if you went to your paint producer and their outcomes were process related? How fast can I mix this? How does it interact with other ingredients? How much energy it takes to mix this? How do I get rid of settling problems? Yada, yada, yada. It's all process related, right? Now, how interested is the car producer in outcomes that are related to the processing of a paint? I'm going to guess it's a big fat 0, right? So if you have that situation, here's what I would do. I would actually divide my project into 2 at that point. So here's what I'm saying. If your direct customers want one set of outcomes, because it's mostly about their process, and your customers want a completely different set of outcomes because it's about the final product, then I think what you should do is, at the end of discovery, what I would do is I would go up here and I would click Save As, and I would make my one project for my direct customers, and I would make one project for my customers' customers, and I would save, step 1 and 2, the market research and discovery. And then I would go, in fact, into my preference interviews with one set of outcomes for the paint producers or direct customers, and another set of outcomes for the car producers who were making the paint. I think hopefully that might address the issue or the outcome that the questioner was having. Does that let me see if the person who had a question, is that what you were kind of getting at on this question?
I believe that got to the heart of it. Dan, we do have a couple questions around how our must-haves, what do we do with must-haves during preference interviews? That might be something to show.
Good. Yeah, let's do that, because I just raced over that. So what happens is, after you do your outcome ratings and you figure out how they measure them, then you get to your must-haves. And this will show up like this. It'll be blank. And you'll say, well, here are the must-haves we heard during our discovery interviews. Now, just to be clear, Mr. or Ms. Customer, what we mean by must-have is it must be met or you cannot proceed. Would you agree that which of these would you agree meet that requirement? And they might say, well, yeah, we got to meet the fire standards, and we got to meet these structural, but no, they don't really have to do this because there's different exceptions, and yeah, I guess they have to be that. And then they might even start describing for you why they said some things were must-haves and some things are not must-haves. And so that is what you want to capture in here. So that's what will happen during preference interviews. Good question.
Yep, I believe that's got us for
Other questions? Okay, then I'm going to wrap up with one last thing here, because I think it might tie it all together, and then we'll just do an open
While you're doing that, Dan, a person wants to know, can I add a new must-have there? And I do not believe we can, but we could add it to the comments if you need.
Yeah, let's say you wanted to add, you mean during the interview.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's right. What I would do is I would add it to the comments right there. Then I would come in if I thought it was a really valid must-have that I'd missed, I'd open up my software after the interview. I would unlock this. See the scary notices there? And then I'd add a must-have right here, must-have. And then I would go ahead and I would save that. And then in my subsequent interviews, here we go. In my subsequent interviews, when I'm doing these, and I get to the must-haves, it'll have a new must-have there. So yeah, get in the comments and then go ahead and add in. And that's not nearly as scary, frankly, as changing your top picks from A to B, adding a new must-have. Maybe we should only have one scary warning on that instead of two scary warnings, Scott. Right. Okay. Now, one last thing, and then I'll be quiet until we see through some general questions. When you're analyzing the preference data, this is where you create your market views, okay? And you can create as many as you want. You can click plus market view. You can decide if you want to do this, just for North America. You can add in different companies that are in North America. You can give weightings by maybe their buying power. So this is a North America market view, okay? Now, see, I just created one. Now what you can do, and you can always edit. Now you go back and you look at all of your interviews, and you're looking for large standard deviations. Here are your market views up here. Here are the different display charts. Start with this one, IMP plus SAT. And then if you see some big standard deviations, go back and play with it. What if I just look at North America and Europe? What if I just look at Asia? What if I just go down the value chain? Now, the reason I can do these, and then I can do the same thing with the bubble charts, same thing with the market satisfaction gap charts. Now, the only reason I can do this sort of playing around with the, edit here, Dan, with this is because I set these regions, value chain position, and other up way back in tool 3.3. So that's why it's a little bit hard to see maybe why this is the case, but that's why in 3.3, you really want to think about these settings very carefully. They give you the ability to slice and dice your data and sometimes get some amazing insights into how you should be segmenting your markets. It can be very powerful. Okay, I think that takes care of this topic. Do we have any other, I'm going to go back here for a second, back to my projects. Do we have any other questions that are general? It could be about your market case. It could be about the rest of the Excel-based product. It could be about market segmentation, discovery interviews, anything at all. We're happy to take the last 30 minutes if you need it and cover things that you've seen that have come up on your teams or in your company. So let me just be quiet for a few seconds. Yeah, please.
Okay, yeah, this is Don. My question is around preference interviews. Now that they're virtual rather than in person, we have to do it this way for our customers. They're bedded down. They don't want us to come in. But these seem to be, this lends itself well to be able to do virtually. Many of the requests are, hey, can you send us the outcomes ahead of time so we can look at them and prepare? What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, we've had others ask this question before. I think it's fantastic to do that. Kind of gets them thinking about it a little bit more. And Scott, if you have a better way of doing this, you just sing out. But you know, when you get, oh, I got rid of this whole example, didn't I? But here we go. This is okay. I think that this would be a good place to do it. We can open this up here. I think this would probably be a nice place to go. I went into tool 3.2, Don, and I went all the way to the end of this thing. And then there's a little print box here. And this is where I could actually print this out to PDF, okay? So I could make a nice PDF of this thing. And I believe that's what I would do, is send them this, say, here are the outcome statements, and here are the outcome names. And I think in my email, I'd say, we're essentially going to ask you 2 questions about each of these. How important is that outcome, and how satisfied are you with your ability to meet it today? And that's what I would do. And that just shows great interest, I think, on their part, that they would ask that question. I think that's fantastic. Yeah, that's good. Nice question, Don. Thank you. And by the way, I like your preface. You are absolutely right. These I mean, you can do discovery interviews by virtual means. We've got a lot of clients doing it very successfully. I got to tell you, even after the pandemic is over, I'm kind of asking myself the question, so why would we want to do in-person preference interviews? We'll still do them. It's another way of engaging customer. Maybe you're going there anyway. But oh my goodness, it's so easy to do preference interviews by virtual means, and you've probably already engaged with them and built a little bit of a relationship with discovery. So I think you're right. This is what we're going to see a lot of, is preference by remote and virtual means. Thanks, Don. That handle it okay?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. You bet. Other questions that you may have? Okay, you know what I didn't do, Scott? I didn't look to see what our next Monday masterclass was. Let me just go over there, and if there's no more questions, we'll say goodbye, but let's go over to our main website, the AIM Institute, training. We'll go under blueprinting, and then, whoops, if I can manage my mouse, my cursor, okay. Look at that, I'm just having a hard time. Oh, you know what's happening? It's mousing over my, my Zoom button. If I go to the Monday masterclass here, what we've got coming up for you guys next time in a couple more weeks, you've now successfully completed this one, and we're going to talk about managing blueprinter data, the search, save as, and more function. And I believe you're going to take us through a lot of this next time. Is that right, Scott?
Sure, yeah.
And by the way, go ahead.
This is Tom. I got a quick question. Yeah. What would your thoughts be on doing like a Zoom meeting to have the cameras on or off with your client?
You know, that is a wonderful question, Tom. I was the guy who, whenever possible, would leave my camera off, okay? I can't tell you why, but I just did. And then over the years, I noticed whenever I would have a call with a European person, they'd always have the camera on. I got to know them better. Now, once the pandemic started, I thought, oh, okay, I better use these cameras. I am a huge believer now in keeping the cameras on. It really builds that relationship when you're doing introductions, nice smiling faces. I think it's not the same as in person, but it probably gets you at least halfway there. So I'd strongly encourage everybody to have the cameras on when you're doing a discovery or a preference interview. Scott, is that your view as well? What would you say?
Yeah, yes, 100%. I would agree.
Yeah, it seems like it just builds those relationships. It's a little bit of a pain. You got to find a place to get set up, and you know, you can't be doing other stuff like email very well. But engagement, really powerful.
Yeah, you get to see body
language. Make sense, Tom?
Yeah, you get to see body language.
In fact, you raise a really good point. If I'm doing a Zoom meeting, you know, today everybody's probably at their home, right? And I can see a bunch of individuals. Now, in a half a year or a year, or whenever we get a vaccine or something, it's very likely that I'll have mine on, maybe I'm even in a conference room, and my customers are maybe all in the same conference room. I think we're going to give up a little bit when that happens, because I'd much rather, instead of just seeing one conference room and barely making out people's eyes and everything, I actually like having a bunch of views of each person's face. It's quite helpful, I think, both ways. Good question. I like it. Last comment on that next managing Blueprinter data. Get this one if you can. Get to this one if you can, because there's some really interesting things that happen up here when you use the Save As feature and the search. And this is a little embarrassing, but I was stumped. Like, there's one little thing like, how could I bring in the interview notes from one particular interview in a completely different project? And Scott had to show me how you can work some of these drop-down menus. So it's not always just real obvious, but Scott will show you all of his tricks of the trade in using the Save As and search. Frankly, until we had the Save As and search, you were kind of limited in what you could do with our cloud-based software if you wanted to merge projects or split projects. Today, you're not limited at all. And we'll cover that in more detail in our next Monday masterclass. All right. Any last questions anybody has? As we used to say, my grandma used to say, speak now or forever hold your peace. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us. We know Monday mornings are busy, but we really appreciate you coming. Your questions help us, by the way. It's like, oh, that was a good question. So some of these may show up in a Blue Help article sometime. Scott, anything else you want to add before we say so long
we'll
for
see
now?
everybody next week, or in 2 weeks, sorry.
2 weeks, great. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week, okay? Thanks for coming. Bye-bye now.